games, Brrraaains A Head-Banging Life here. Carl and Brendan, happy Halloween, 13 days of Halloween, and we are doing 10 things we hate this time about horror and heavy metal. 2 things that should go really well together, but turns out really often don't. We had 10 things we love. Go check that out. We praised lots of bands and artists and so on, including the guy that I'm going to start off by losing my shit at in my first couple of ones, but we'll get to that. In fact, shall I just start then?
Yeah, go for it. Go straight in.
I'm going to have him as well, and I've got him twice in 2 different ways. So I'm going to start with the obvious one. In the Love, I praised Rob Zombie as a kind of like crossover guy of both rock and metal and horror, mainstream enough that people know his name. And I praised his early work. Now I'm going to praise everything that came after. Praise. I'm going to destroy everything that came after. So honestly, Rob Zombie, to me now, if I see his name, I dread it. I go, great. This is going to, I expect crap. I realized quickly he was a one-trick pony. And it came off, and basically from Halloween, his Halloween remake, and especially his Halloween remake sequel, Lords of Salem, one of the most mind-numbing, boring movies I've ever watched.
Yep.
31, that movie sickened me. Not because, it's so gory, because of how badly it was shot. And recently, while I don't think it was a terrible movie, I thought it was a waste of time. 3 from Hell. Rob Zombie hasn't made a good horror movie since The Devil's Rejects. I know not everyone's going to agree with that, but in my opinion, he has not made a good horror movie since The Devil's Rejects. And that is a very long time ago. Yet he's still given this platform, and it's not deserved anymore. He's done more bad than good. Yeah.
Bold words.
Yeah. It's a strong opinion, I know, and it's not a popular opinion, but...
I mean, I would probably go as far as to say Rob Zombie hasn't made a good horror movie properly since House of a Thousand Corpses, because I don't think The Devil's Rejects is not really a horror properly. Only because it carried on that story that people class it as a horror.
You're very right. You could argue Devil's Rejects is more of just a violent thriller. Yeah.
Yeah. But as much as I'm going to go straight into mine. I will point out, as you know anyway, I'm probably going to struggle with my 10 here. I certainly don't know the depth of horror knowledge that you have. But with Rob Zombie, I don't mind the Halloween stuff. I don't think they're good films. I don't think they're necessary or anything like that. But I don't mind them. I found them relatively watchable. But I agree with everything else you said, 31 and all that part of rubbish.
Yeah.
But I've got Rob Zombie on mine, and this was kind of slightly for a different reason. And this was really to do with the lack of metal in Rob Zombie films.
Interesting. Now,
in House of a Thousand Corpses, which has got a bit of a metal soundtrack, in fact, a lot of it was Rob Zombie
himself.
Stuff.
Yeah.
And I believe he did quite a lot of original recordings with it with Wednesday 13 and John 5, who was eventually in Marilyn Manson.
Yeah.
Excuse me. But outside of that, considering this guy is like, one of the most famous names in metal outside of metal, because of the film stuff, I always kind of hoped that with somebody of his stature breaking it, and we're not talking low budget horror movies here, we're talking big budget, all over the, the mainstream kind of websites and everything like that he had a good opportunity to push metal a little bit, to maybe get some lesser known bands and give them an avenue to be on films. Do you know what I mean? I always felt that really do, but instead a lot of his stuff tended to gravitate more towards like kind of southern country western sort of stuff. Actually, in The Devil's Rejects, for example, there's very little kind of heavy ambient sort of scores or anything used at all in it. In fact, it always goes towards this kind of country drawl,
Yeah, not
wrong. I was quite disappointed with it, to be honest. I just felt like, we always have this thing, don't we? We're all like, metal's a bit of a family, and like for somebody to get that opportunity like he did, don't get me wrong, he was big in metal, but he wasn't he wasn't going to be a multi-millionaire or anything like that. So this was a huge opportunity for him, and he took it, and kind of just wasn't really interested in bringing metal along with him on the journey.
It's a Rob Zombie trope. You literally, when you're talking about, all I can picture is one fucking scene, and it's from House of a Thousand Corpses, and it's this really drawn out slow motion scene where Otis has a gun to a cop's head, and I don't know if it's Tom Waits or someone like that is playing country style song, and it drags on for ages, and it's that shit. It's basically, I really like the song. It influenced me. I want it in this film. Yeah.
Yeah, it just would have been cool to see his metal status kind of bring a few small bands along, a few friends of guys that he's toured with, and just saying, you know what, as metal fans, we don't get radio, we don't get TV, we also don't get invited to Hollywood to do the soundtrack unless you're a huge fucking name. Here's a guy coming from the metal world. Let's give some smaller bands you know, like a little cut in a song, cut in a film somewhere.
It's a good one. Yeah, we're just trashing Rob Zombie.
Yeah, take that, Rob.
Yeah. I actually was going to have another Rob Zombie one, but I've kind of covered my first one. So while you were talking, something flew into my head while you were talking about music and all that. And it's going to replace the one I was originally going to do with this. And that is horror movies / horror action movies that go, we're going to have an action bit, right? And I think of like the likes of Doom and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, we're going to put some metal. And what they go is for the most generic butt rock metal. You know, you know, I watched House of the Dead, Uwe Boll's House of the Dead recently. And that has this kind of metalish soundtrack, but it's the most butt fucking radio shit you'd ever hear that you hate hearing with a fucking passion.
Yeah.
That shit, honestly, I fucking hate. It's the most you know, it's just like really heavy in the background and it's so not even noticeable. You can hear it played anywhere, almost like it's free serve fucking music. Yes,
yeah.
That wank. Stop that. Use actual music or don't. But I'm going to continue as the same one. But if you are going to use an actual song, right, don't do this. This has pissed me off. It's all flying through my head. This has pissed me off for decades. Yeah, decades, because the film was quite old. There's a movie called Ghost Ship that stars, oh God, I've forgotten his name. He played the devil one time. Famous actor. It's on a ship. It's got a really cool opening where all these people get killed by a swinging thing and all that. And then these pirates go on there and they find out the ship's haunted. Mudvayne were featured on this quite heavily. The song was Not Falling. And that's fine because it's played in the movie over certain scenes. But what fucked me off, right, it's going to sound so weird, is that there's a part where one of them are on their boat and they're playing Mudvayne's Not Falling on the radio. But it's on the soundtrack too. That's breaking the fourth wall. This ain't Deadpool. No, you got to have it in the movie the character's listening to while them playing over an action sequence. Hate it. Took me right out of the movie. I was like, well, this clearly isn't real. How am I supposed to buy into this?
You knew it wasn't real when Mudvayne were played on the radio, surely.
Fucking, yeah, that there, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What the fuck? What channel is he listening to? Yeah. But yeah, that's a long one, but there it is.
Yeah. All right. I guess kind of similar, staying on the same kind of route and about songs being used. And you kind of touched on this a little bit anyway, but I guess I was trying to make sense of it a little bit. And I kind of saw like metal being used in horror or horror action, often more, or sci-fi, you know, that sort of stuff, as being part of the nu metal phase, you know, where I guess it makes sense because while nu metal was out and becoming like this big deal, it was pushing us closer and closer to the mainstream. And because of that, it was bands within that category that tended to be picked up and used on, you know, the big kind of films. So whether it's Slipknot, My Plague on Resident Evil.
Of course.
Linkin Park have featured a fair bit. Korn, Disturbed's Down with the Sickness comes up about 5 or 6 times when you look at this.
Oh, Dawn of the Dead remake.
Yeah.
Fucking hell.
Manson, of course. But, you know, even though Manson's been around kind of like a long time, it was all very much in the nu metal era only where these kind of were touched. And I guess as nu metal died and metal kind of went back, you know, like, haha, leave us alone. They did. You know, so always kind of, I guess I find it's a bit disappointing in it that whenever you watch a horror movie and there is a bit of metal in it, well, not all the time, but a lot of the time, it's going to be the same collection of 10, 15, 20 tracks from the same 10, 15 bands. When you have like proper good kind of horror inspired bands out there, you know, that actually think, oh, this music could be perfect in this film. Yep. You know,
well, that leads into my next one then, which is this unimaginative way of putting metal into horror, which you've kind of touched upon there. You brought up My Plague by Slipknot. And when I talked in the Love video about hating certain videos where it's just, here's a band playing, here's some clips of the fucking film. That is a great fucking example of that. But one that also jumps to mind that people really like, but I hate the video for. And it's Slipknot Spit It Out with the Shining parody kind of thing. And I hate shit like that because it ends up being like attached and being like, oh man, that's so cool. They're touching upon horror. And it's like, they're just fucking doing this. They're just doing clips from the fucking movie. But look, it's Joey on the tricycle and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I don't like that. It's unimaginative. If you're going to use, there are many bands out there that use horror to tell their own stories in whatever way it might be it grindcore death and stuff like that. As long as, especially if you're doing a concept around that and you've got that story you want to tell, that's what I'm way more interested in. Yeah. That or covers. Don't be like, oh yeah, this song's This song goes out to The Shining because everyone's done that a fucking million times in a time over. And then it's just like, yeah, we're singing about the room and yeah, Jack Torrance and all that. It's like, oh God, fuck off, man. Unimaginative storytelling.
Indeed. Right. Let's carry on. We're kind of, I don't know. I kind of feel like we're both like essentially stretching out. You know, like what could have easily been one thing.
It's gonna get worse.
Yeah. But I'm gonna keep stretching. So, and this is generally just the lack of heavy metal in horror.
Mm-hmm.
And just considering how perfectly suited heavy metal is to horror, how like throughout the heydays of horror and heavy metal, you know, they were both the devil incarnate together.
Yeah.
You know, and everything kind of matched, and horror inspired metal and metal inspired horror. The two have kind of been hand in hand. You would kind of expect to see a lot of horror movies like littered with it, you know, but like instead of horror often leans towards things like dark wave and synth and stuff like that, you know, to create their kind of spookiness, you know.
Yeah.
And you watch some films and you just think like, oh, this is crying out for a bit of cattle decapitation or something like that during a graphic scene, or you know, like a sort of spree, you know, where somebody goes berserk. And it just sucks really, because we tend to find our way into low budget films a lot of the time. Major production firms stay away, and it's just, you know, on the serious side of it, it's just another revenue stream for bands that isn't open to heavy metal.
Yeah.
You know, along with radio, you know, TV, all that sort of stuff. It's just another one where, when, you know, that's not for us.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, right, bands. This is for bands. If you're watching, do me a favor, please stop covering the Monster Mash. It was funny and clever the first time, but everyone that goes out and goes, yeah, let's do a Halloween track. Let's do the Monster Mash. No, if I never hear that song ever again in my life, let alone a metal version of the Monster Mash, it's like, it fucking every time I see a band, it's like, oh yeah, we've got to cover the Monster Mash. They say it like they're clever, like they're the first person ever to fucking do it. And it's like, no, just don't cover the Monster Mash, please. I don't even like the fucking song. Stop. Yeah. So really, it's actually, I hate the Monster Mash, but I wanted to tie it into rock and metal.
I agree wholeheartedly, though. I mean, shit. It's fucking terrible, isn't it?
It really is.
Right. Weirdly enough, when I was struggling to come up with a couple here, I ended up kind of like writing down some random thoughts, and they turned out to be like much more serious than I intended it to be. So I'm going to go for that one next. And this is not exclusive to horror and heavy metal, but it was certainly part of it. And this was this whole satanic panic era. I guess it was probably more than just the States, but it's certainly most well documented and spoken about as being an American thing. You know, so this isn't, you know, I'm not saying that, well, obviously I am. I'm not saying I hate satanic panic or I hate, you know, anything like that, but it's more about the idiots that allow things to happen. And like, you know, heavy metal and horror, not exclusively, but they were both seen as agents of the devil really in a time where it was believed Satan was worming his way into society through mediums like heavy metal, horror, video games, books, freedom of speech, anything really that opposed the church. And, you know, this whole notion that horror and heavy metal can create such discussion and debate within society is fantastic, but the negative side of it is how closed off it was, obviously, by the church more than anything else. And, you know, the whole notion being that, you know, we have to protect our children from these entertainers and embrace them in the loving arms of the church, without realizing at the time it was those loving arms where the true horror really lay await, you know. So that's where I kind of got more serious than I was expecting it to. But I was like, you know, when you think about horror and heavy metal and the bad stuff that surrounded it, while it was never its fault, it was done to it. But actually, the outcome of realistically, the outcome of that time is the death of a ton of bands, films being rated ridiculously high to the point where they became video nasties in some cases, or just dropped off the radar completely, not being finished. You know, bands being kicked from record labels.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I guess it's a serious thing that all came simply from people's fear of, I guess, the openness of horror and heavy metal, and the fact that it was showing some truths that maybe people didn't want to see at the time. But there you go.
Follow that one. Fuck.
Yeah, that was genuinely an accident. I was like, oh, what do? I don't know what to write.
Well, let me go on the attack then. So you put it in the love and I'm putting in the hate. It is Cradle of Fear, the 2001 low-budget British horror film directed by Alex Chandon. 3 separate half-hour segments linked by an overarching... It's an anthology, exactly what you expect from an anthology. The main narrative involves an imprisoned serial killer called Kempo wreaking vengeance on those responsible for his capture. And he does this through his son. Most notable because Danny Filth played an unnamed character referred to in the credits as The Man. And this is simply that I got, when this turned up, I remember the excitement surrounding it. A horror movie starring Danny Filth from that horror band Cradle of Filth. That's going to be fucking awesome.
Shit. And it was.
I really don't like it.
No, I get it completely. Like I said, all of my love for that film is, I guess, from the tongue-in-cheek side of things. You know, I don't look at it and go, this is the best horror film ever made.
But it takes itself so seriously.
Yeah, but I guess I don't, so it's okay.
Okay, that balances it, yeah.
All right. Similar thing then, I guess, in that, you know, things that you really kind of looked forward to, but then were disappointed. Now, this is going back in time, so I'm sure you'll remember it too. But I guess this is really poignant to me because I still, to this day, remember my utter disappointment when I bought the Resident Evil soundtrack on CD. So this is for the first movie, and probably was partly through my Plague Slipknot stuff, and you know, this is going to be good. And there was a lot of like kind of metal theme stuff, and I quite enjoyed the film, not being a diehard fan of the games. So you know, any things that were missing or wrong didn't really have that impact on me.
Yeah.
So I was like, this is going to be brilliant. The film's great. Bands like Slipknot and all that on the CD, I'm going to be all over this. And I remember getting it, you know, and I just remember so the bands that it was like Fear Factory were on it, Marilyn Manson, Il Nino, Static X, you know, bands that were, I guess, big hitters at the times.
Yeah.
You know, and it was a Roadrunner release, and when that was a thing, when that mattered, you know, somebody said there's a Roadrunner compilation coming out now, I'd be like, yeah, it's probably not for me, mate.
The old tribute songs.
Yeah, back in the day though, it would have been like, oh, fucking hell. But actually, all it was remixes of their original songs.
Yeah.
Like tranced up versions of My Plague, tranced up versions of What Goes Around Comes Around. You don't remember that Il Nino song?
Oh, no, I can't. Il Nino, one of the bands that people loved and I hate. I
just remember being so disappointed that I just got it and I was like, oh, you know, not an original song to be seen. And then the ones that are on it is a compilation of all the shit I already owned, but remixed. You know, this DJ has taken this song and ripped it to shit. Enjoy.
Yeah. Manson featured quite heavily on it, didn't he?
Manson's it throughout the film as well, but I think there was a couple of tracks on his. But again, it was never the song or a new song or anything like that. There was nothing in the soundtrack that was new. It was all just songs that had been taken, remixed to fuck, and then pushed out as a Roadrunner compilation. That I fell for the marketing of hook, line, and sinker to have my CD arrive in my hands, or I probably picked it up from Our Price in Woolwich or whatever, you know, and then got home, put it on, started hearing some scratching and shit, and I was like, what the fuck have I done? And just, and even to this day, watch a Resident Evil movie, anything like that, listen to My Plague, I get this instant wash of disappointment, like, I remember that day, I was really disappointed.
Oh, that's awesome. What an effect. I love that. Oh, goodness me. You triggered a memory that's going to replace one of mine with that, talking about disappointing remix albums. So now this is going to be a technicality, so give me a break, folks, because this technically, I consider this a Christmas movie. However, it features Halloween so heavily that people often consider it a Halloween movie. I think you can get away with both. And it is The Nightmare Before Christmas. Now, for me, Christmas movie, but hey, by the by. So obviously it's got a pretty awesome soundtrack on its own. Great songs. However, did you know there's such a thing called Nightmare Revisited exists? Where rock bands, some metal bands covered a lot of it.
Yeah.
So some of the war ones you'll remember is Marilyn Manson did This Is Halloween. The All-American Rejects did Jack's Lament. Flyleaf did What's This? That is the worst one. Korn did Kidnap the Santa Claus. That is the second worst one. Rise Against did Making Christmas. Then you get like the likes of Plain White Tees. Amy Lee does Sally's Song. This album is I think it's shit. Aside from Marilyn Manson's This Is Halloween, because his voice fits that quite nicely, this is a fucking horrendous thing that makes you embarrassed that they ever sat down and went, this is a good fucking idea. I hated it. I
I agree with you while you were saying that. I was thinking like the Manson one's quite good though, and you're
It's
right. That's the only one.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is the only one, man. There isn't another thing on that album that should ever be listened to again by anyone.
Absolutely. But yes, so that's that one that triggered a memory. Thanks for that
Yeah.
memory.
Let's go back in another memory. I'm going to go for a film this time.
Mm.
And this was a real disappointment of a film to me. And it was Queen of the Damned.
Ooh, bad movie.
Yeah. So obviously in this one, carrying on the, or it was meant to be carrying on the Anne Rice Chronicles of the Vampire or whatever the book series was
Vampire
called.
Chronicles or something, yeah.
Yeah. But I know that she absolutely rubbished this film and said like it mutilated her source material.
It's not a fan.
No, not at all. She hated it. Lestat is a rock star now because I guess why not? The film just isn't good, and the soundtrack isn't up to scratch either, considering it was produced by Pete Jonathan Davis. At the time, a couple good songs aside, because there are one or two on the whole soundtrack that are okay, like "Cold" by Static X and Deftones' "Changing the House of Flies." But aside from that, it's absolutely terrible. And it's just one of those films, I guess, that promised much back in the day. Well, the way I wrote at the end of my little snippet I wrote down is it promised much back in the day and delivered Disturbed and Papa Roach. But like back in the court, Jonathan Davis, top peak game, and then they say there's like a vampire film coming out, which is essentially, I guess, kind of like a musical, to a degree.
Yeah.
And a lot of the singing and the songs and everything are written by metal bands with Jonathan Davis producing it all. And it was like, oh shit, this could be brilliant. And then it's like, fuck me.
Yep.
Disturbed and Papa Roach.
Yeah, when I saw Queen of the Damned, I didn't know anything about like Anne Rice's longest story. I just heard sequel to Interview with a Vampire.
Yeah,
when I saw something that was so fucking far left field, I was just left so puzzled. And ultimately, that's a movie marred by the death of Aaliyah. So that's all it's ever going to be remembered for. Aaliyah died shortly afterwards.
Yeah.
So sticking with films. Now, in the Love video, I talked about cameos and cameos from rock and metal stars. Now, the negative isn't about cameos, because I don't think you can get too mad about Ozzy Osbourne butchering a 1-minute scene, because he's not an actor. He's in it for a minute. Why are you getting mad at that? However, when you go, that rock guy, that metal band, let's put them in a starring role. What the fuck are you doing? What the fuck are you doing? What are you doing? And I instantly, when I thought of this one, 2 movies jumped to mind. So that was all I bothered writing down, because it was like, they're the 2 that jumped to mind. Now, I recently reviewed John Carpenter's Vampires, a mid-90s movie with James Woods. A lot of fun, very, very over-the-top fun. There are several sequels. And I remember seeing Vampires Los Muertos and getting really excited until I saw who it starred. Now, bear in mind, I'm going to admit something here. I was once, I guess I am, I just haven't seen it in a long time, a big Ally McBeal fan. So, and I love season 3 and season 4 of Ally McBeal, but I hate the final season because they went, John Bon Jovi, he's a good actor, right? Let's make him the new love interest, replacing the likes of Robert Downey Jr., which is insane. I know why, I'm not saying like why, I know why Robert Downey Jr. went to jail, hence why he wasn't in it, but John Bon Jovi fucking sucks as I think he fucking sucks as an actor. And then someone went, you know what? That Vampires movie, let's make a sequel and make John Bon Jovi the star of it. That movie, I fucking hate it. It's one of the worst vampire films I've ever seen. And I swear to Christ, if I ever see John Bon Jovi act and end it again, I won't watch it. I won't bother. I'll be like, nope, he's shit. He's not doing it. And then a couple of years ago, I came across a horror movie called Dark Floors. And it was random. I didn't even look into it until I saw the front cover. And I was like, why do I know that? That's fucking Lordy. Why? What Lordy? Dark Floors stars Lordy as an evil band that haunts a hospital. Movie fucking sucks. Stop doing that. That's absurd. They're not actors. They're not actors. That's the point. Very few can cross over. There are some, Henry Rollins and the like, but these guys, no, man. And Lordy aren't even a good horror band. They're a cheesy horror band.
Yep.
So, like, yeah, that's it. Yeah. Giving fucking rock and metal stars starring roles in horror.
Yeah, I can second the Bon Jovi stuff.
Fucking sucks. He's so bad.
He's been acting as a rock star for like 30 odd years, so you'd think he'd be all right at it by now. Burn. Okay. One of the things, right? And I reckon you'd be able to dispute this because you've seen so many more horror movies than I
Okay.
ever probably even knew existed in the world.
Mhm.
But this is just generally that in the horror movies that I have seen, especially around the slasher style thing, why is it that like rock and metal fans are generally portrayed as, you know, sort of dumb, weed smoking, overweight losers with a lack of brain cells? You know, we aren't genuinely all like that. Some of us are relatively smart and stable, like honest. But you know, like I said, I know that there's probably loads of examples out there where actually it's different. But for the most part, whenever I like kind of picture those sort of, especially that sort of teen slasher, you know, area, there's always like the jock, the you know, the pretty girl.
Mhm.
Then there'll be the goth kind of ones, and generally they're all fucking idiots.
Yep.
You know, always
Well,
stoned out of their face, and it's like it's such a shit stereotype.
yeah. It's that though. That's it. That's the
Yeah.
answer. Stereotypes. You're creating Slasher 101. You already named some. Slasher 101. We have had muscly jock who plays for the varsity football team. We have a varsity cheerleader who tends to be a bit sluttish, normally blonde, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You might have your weed smoker who likes a bit of ska and stuff like that. Then you have your goth loner who's angry at the world, and that's your rock and metal fan.
You get your nerd who's got like a knitted jumper on, you know, that sort of thing. But
yeah, it's 101 horror. Yeah.
Yeah, it's lazy and it's dumb, man. I don't like it.
Well, as you brought up slashers, so I had a real think about what I wanted, what I thought was the worst sort of like song to be featured ever in, like a band and a song to be featured in a horror movie. Like, what's a terrible example of that? And I actually ended up not even rewatching, but watching some I didn't even know existed. And then I stumbled across one. And I was like, wait, what, them? In a horror movie. So the movie is Scream 3, which isn't a good film anyway. And it's Creed. And it's What If, the song What If. Now that fucking song is horrendous. Creed are a terrible band. We all know this. But the video for it, why is it predominantly, ignoring the fact it just cuts to clips and relates to Dewey, the character of David Arquette, with the band? Why is the hair blowing constantly? What's with the wind machine? How is that Scream related? I don't get that. But like, who went Scream 3, Slasher, Creed, them? What, you know, it's like going, let's put Stained in alongside them, you know? It doesn't make any fucking sense. But yeah, I hated it. Yeah,
I can tell.
Yeah.
Okay. This was kind of more of just a random rant I think I wrote down rather than anything else, but we'll go for it. And I just wrote, why is it that the mainstream audience can accept these days? So horror has become much more mainstream over the last 10 years, and also because of that, it's become a lot more watered down, I think, as well, you know, to try and cater for as big a crowd as possible. Why is it so the mainstream audience these days could happily accept a masked serial killer roaring and running around stabbing the shit out of everyone as a viable form of entertainment?
Yeah.
But when a masked singer sings or shouts about the horrors of the real world, it's deemed nonsensical and overly aggressive. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't want them to get it. I'm fine, you know, because we don't really want them to become part of our world. But horror's popularity, at least, should make people more accepting of some of the more extreme metal, you would think. It's essentially music's horror genre, after all, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Do you think a lot of the difficulty is people even getting past that initial thing? So, you know, you take something that's quite gory, let's say Cannibal Corpse. People have to get over that initial step of just hearing the music before they can even delve into any kind of depth to do with lyrical content.
Yeah, possibly. I think I might actually answer my own question in my 10th one.
Oh, okay, brilliant. There we go. All right. Well, next one's really straightforward. It's simple, which is those of you that go, yeah, we're going to sample some horror music and go for the same boring ones. If I hear another fucking song that's like, yeah, this is a horror song, and you sample the Exorcist theme or the Halloween theme.
Yeah, so I was thinking straight away, a bit of that Halloween theme.
Oh, mate.
Or the 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you. You know, the little singing bit.
The kaka part of Friday the 13th. That shit, that's been done to death. How lazy can you be? Either don't do it or fucking surprise us. Really surprise us.
Yeah.
Go for some obscure shit that no one's ever heard of. You see some nerd in a fucking basement. And that'll do.
All right. So this is my second last one then, and this was another really short one. And I did actually even title this one "Shit, I'm Struggling Here." Okay. And I just wrote with a question mark, Alice Cooper. And then the reason for this is I know this is an era thing. And I like Alice Cooper. I have nothing but respect for the man. You know, I really genuinely do. But I've always kind of disliked how he was deemed, as particularly shock horror, and when especially compared to modern shock, he's essentially hugely inoffensive and
Very.
jolly nice.
Yeah.
When you compare them to bands like, I don't know, like your Mayhems or the stuff that Manson gets up to and all that. And then Alice Cooper is the godfather of shock.
Yeah.
And generally he's like being covered by Daphne and Celeste and stuff like that. Do you know what I mean? And it's nothing about Alice Cooper, but I always it's a very era specific in it, because I think if I was born or growing up listening to Alice Cooper then, it was shocking for the time, but it's certainly not shocking now.
No.
And nothing he has done really musically in the last probably 2 decades, man, maybe more, would be anything that I would deem as shocking, other than maybe some songs are shocking.
Yeah, I mean, I completely understand where you're coming from. I think now almost with Alice Cooper, like if you were to sort of see him live and see his shtick, you kind of go, oh, that's cute.
That's what it's like. He's like a granddad now, and he's like, if he come out and like had a bit of makeup on, you'd be like, oh, granddad's got into the makeup tin again.
Go on, Vincent. Go on, Vinny. Do your thing. My last one. Right. So we're going back to about a year ago. What I decided on night shifts, what I was like, you know what would be really cool for the site? Kiss have done a ton of movies. Some of them are animated and all that, but we can cover them. Because if they're starring Kiss or have Kiss's voices, surely that's a way to cover it as a kind of music movie kind of thing. I watched one, and that was it. I didn't review it. I didn't even waste my time, and I've not watched one since. I watched Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park, which was made in 1978. There was a big clue at the start, and I was like, wait, Hanna-Barbera?
All right.
The animators, Flintstones and stuff like that. And I was like, well, that's not a good sign. This isn't maybe for me. But it's a live action movie. It's not a cartoon. But has Kiss playing superhero versions of themselves, where they are basically trying to play a show at an amusement park. They're going to play a show, but they come up against robotic doppelgangers of themselves. And hijinks ensues. And it is, how can I say, how many more ways can I say it is acting? Kiss are fucking terrible. Like everything bad. And it's not even in a whole, that sounds like it could be silly fun, because it's also incredibly boring. But not only that, it also is a wank job for how great Kiss are. That's all it is. How brilliant. Oh yeah, Kiss are the greatest band in the world. And in 1978, I guess that was a lot more believable than in 2020 when I was putting this on 2019 last year. But like, I don't care for Kiss. So sitting down and having them basically look at the camera and go, we're the fucking best band in the world. Don't you know it? Just maybe go, you bunch of assholes. And to have it also aimed at children, because it's a Hanna-Barbera thing, and it's very, very coy and tame. It feels like a Power Rangers episode at times with the sort of robotic style of thing. And it all just like, oh, we're going to get to play a concert at an amusement park. I'm going to an amusement park. I want to go on some rides. I don't want to have to be distracted by Gene Simmons and people like that. Come on, man. But that was it. Yeah. I never did another Kiss movie.
Yeah, I mean, what you were saying, even before you described the film, you said like all this collection of Kiss movies is like, oh, it sounds like it's going to be bad right away. Because I think a lot of what they did, and that's probably what it was back then, was the film was to market the merch. Do you know what I mean? Rather than like the merch kind of market in a film, Kiss was selling action figures, and here was a way to show them in action. It
was peak that time when everything was selling a Kiss. And the joke is, I am actually going to come back to one around about Christmas time, because I'm going to try and put myself through. I think it's called Kiss Saved Christmas or Kiss Saves Christmas.
Did they?
Yeah.
Did they though?
So I'm fascinated.
I mean, at least it can't be worse than the one you watched, because if there's anything worse than having Kiss in a film, surely it's having Kiss ×2 in a film. Kiss and their doppelgangers.
Yeah, you are right. Actually, you mentioned that. Yeah,
like Kiss with 8 members.
I think the Christmas one's animated too, so that might be at least. Oh, the animation's good.
Yeah.
There you go. My last one.
All right. I mean, I started off writing this one, I'm out, and then I wrote best I can do is offer a joke, and then I had another random thought which was connected to my previous random thought, so I just kind of wrote it down, and I guess it's kind of serious, but like it's more of I guess thinking out loud.
Yeah.
So I did wonder if metal's fall in popularity over the years is mainly down to the mainstream's inability to dedicate time and effort into picking up the feeling and statement found in lyrical content and song structures.
Yeah.
You know, back in the 70s and 80s especially, it shocked the pants off of people, whether it's horror or heavy metal. And even in the early 90s, you know, there was still that a little bit. You know, bands like Slipknot were shocking parents and, you know, that sort of stuff. And like I said, horror did the same thing. You know, films were, there was still a fair amount of originality.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to say everything was great, because it wasn't, but there was still a fair amount of originality.
Imagination was running wild.
Yeah. As time's gone by, you know, people have become desensitized to horror. Horror has also become diluted, and things like that. And then surely impact on the metal too is that it's all kind of lost its shock value a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so parents aren't scared anymore. Kids don't find rebellion in metal. They're more likely to rebel by getting pilled up and attending a rave.
Yeah.
And just like most horror, maybe metal needs some reinvention again to scare the pants off of some parents. But there you go. My random thought.
And there we thought we would be coming up with next to nothing, yet we've had these detailed links and attempts to combine the two. I think we did all right.
Yeah. Well, hang on. We've got the highlight of the whole episode coming now.
Joke.
Where, because I was so out of things, I was like, I've got to find a joke. And then the first joke I found, I thought was fucking hilarious.
Go on.
Okay. I'm reading a horror novel at the moment in Braille. There's something bad is about to happen. I can feel it.
And on that excellent note, we'll leave it there. There you go, the 10 things we hate about the links between horror, heavy metal, and rock. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you very much for watching. You can check us out on gbhbl.com, as well as on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Tumblr. Go to Patreon and help us out over there. That's patreon.com/gbhbl, as well as Big Cartel, where you can find some of our merchandise. We have a podcast running on SoundCloud and Apple Podcasts. And of course, if you like this video, do us a favour, hit the subscribe button and help the channel grow. Games, horror and heavy metal, what else is life for?